This episode was filmed on Boonwurrung land and Jarrah land in Victoria. Welcome to episode 1, season 3 of Candid Tiny House. I'm your host, Shannon Schultz, and I'm so pumped to bring you this episode and this whole season of wonderful tiny house builds. You'll learn so much. There's content here that we haven't heard before from people living in tiny house situations, like with families, and really going through some hard stuff as well as the really positive things. So I'm super excited to share with you the whole season. This interview was actually filmed in June 2022. And that's a very long time between interviewing and publishing. So I am really sorry for Jesse and Esther that I neglected to publish this for so long. We did get waylaid with a very different season of season 2 of Candid Tiny House. But stick around for their reflections. You catch them at a moment where they're just about to sell their tiny house. So they're being interviewed in a tiny house that's empty. All their stuff's been moved out. They're planning on selling their tiny house. And they're reflecting on the build process, the budget, what worked, what didn't. They moved in when one of their children was 2 or 3 years old, and then they had a home birth in their tiny house during COVID. They've lived in that tiny house in Esther's parents' back garden for 2 years by the time that they're moving out. And so they reflect somewhat somberly on some of the things that didn't work. It's very informative for any people who are thinking about, can I have kids in a tiny house? What ages are difficult and what ages are easier for tiny house living? How many kids can I fit in a tiny house? All of this stuff really helps to flesh out some of those questions and panic moments that we have as people who are thinking, can I live in a tiny house with kids? I reflect on some of the things that happened for me when I was a parent of a small child in a tiny house, and I got pregnant in our tiny house too. So there's lots of parental information there. So you can pick that apart for something about whether or not that's going to be relevant for you and what you can do to manage the concept of going into a tiny house on wheels with kids. So it's a super interesting and engaging conversation. They share very generously. It is very much a warts and all. This is not going to sell tiny houses as a concept. It's more there for your information and for your earnest researching. Also, stick around for the end because I have an update for you on what their current project is, which you may find heartening and amusing. Thanks so much to Jesse and Esther for letting me share everything about what they've gone through and what their current updates are. Okay, stick around. Candid Tiny House is a podcast and a video where I get to go back to our past clients, people who've bought a trailer from us and taken a course on how to build a tiny house on wheels in Australia, and they've gone ahead and built their tiny house. And then we get to have an honest, deep, reflective conversation about what it's really like to build a tiny house so that you can learn from their reflections, their mistakes, their wisdom, all of their rich and varied experiences from building a tiny house on wheels in Australia. So grab your notebook and a cup of tea because we're sharing real stories of what it's like to build a tiny house. Well, I'd love to just start from the beginning as like your decision to move into a tiny house, what your family looked like and
Yeah, well, I guess I got kind of really into tiny houses probably um maybe even before Obi was born. So Obi's nearly 6 now. So around about that time, I was like following a whole lot of those sort of accounts on Instagram, and um I think we found Fred's house, and we're like saw you guys. I'm like, oh, they have a family in a tiny house, and I was just trying to find all these people who had families in tiny houses. Um, and yeah, just like watching a whole lot of videos, and then Obi came. We were renting at the time, and we were pretty happy in our rental. Um, but yeah, when Obi came along, we kind of thought, oh, it'd be really nice to have our own place, but just with new property being what it is, like in hindsight, not quite cheap but now. But yeah, we were just like, what's the way that we can do this? And it felt like building a tiny house was probably the way that we could do it. Have our own um, little space that was just for us. So yeah, I think when Obi was about a few months, like maybe almost 6 months old or something, we had a phone call with Fred, like a Zoom call with Fred, and we chatted about um we just chatted about tiny house stuff and got a bit of advice on him about stuff that we were thinking about. We kind of started Jesse did a SketchUp model, a few SketchUp models of like, what we wanted.
Yeah, we did masking tape in our house along the floor, kind of figure out what space looks like. SketchUp helped a lot to be able to kind of physically or sort of see what the sort of the millimeters and meters add up to here, there, and everywhere. And we did a workshop with you guys up in Castlemaine as well. Really good. I think that's sort of where it kicked off, and then we went through a few different ideas about how to go about it, and landed on working with a friend of ours who's an architect builder to sort of design and at least build the initial part of it anyway. I don't want to get too far down the track if we're sort of...
Well, yeah, then I guess we ordered our trailer from Fred, and we were meeting with Daffer and Will and talking about, like we kind of gave him our SketchUp plans and talked about what we wanted, and then he had a few ideas, and so we kind of changed some of our ideas under kind of his guidance, I guess. And then we we ordered the trailer and we ended up getting it shipped to Coburg, or towed to Coburg, where Will had a warehouse.
Yeah, we almost got to build it in a warehouse, but there was a lease agreement that fell through, so we ended up building it outside. The punishing weather in industrial Coburg in 2018, which was a pretty hot summer compared to some of the summers we've had since then. So yeah.
And were you involved in that too, Jesse? Were you participating in the build?
Yeah, I was sort of trying to save us some time and money by doing some work with those guys.
An hour.
Well, it ended up being I did a heck of a lot more than I ever expected to. And I've gotten a lot of building experience out of that, which is good.
I'm curious about that particular role that you play, because that's quite rare to step in and be part of the build team whilst as a professional also like building, because it can really if with an unskilled owner builder joining a skilled team, the owner builder can massively slow down the program because they're being trained on the job, So I'd like to hear a bit about like what parts of it you could do, or if you brought skills to that to form like a meaningful part of the team.
Will was a friend of ours too, the architect who designed it. He ended up designing it on CAD or Rhino or something, like one of those programs. So I kind of was with him the whole way, like while we were designing it on the, like I did an initial SketchUp design. I gave that to him and he sort of adjusted it to his own, ideas and experience. And I've sort of done a lot of handiwork over the years. I've definitely, I've become for work now, I'm building, and that's basically on the experience I got doing this in the end. Yeah. So yeah, I'd like to think I didn't slow it down too much, but no, more just sort of like the labor intensive things as well. Like when it came to the actual build, like I didn't do there was a lot of welding. We've got a steel frame, sort of portal frame. So I didn't sort of do the welding, or like our windows are made from a light hardwood called Polonia, which is just a little bit lighter than Western red cedar. And we've built the windows from scratch in the factory in Coburg. So I didn't do that kind of high level of, building work. I sort of more did the things like fix off the screws and the laborious things like cladding and painting. But since we got to about lock-up stage, I kind of took over from there. One of the guys was a guitar luthier, so super handy with timber. He did the stairs, and for me it was more just cleaning up at the end of the day and whatnot, whatever I could kind of alleviate for other people to need to do.
Great. So you were able to guess a bit what I would call being like a skilled labourer. It's a labourer's job, but you're not being tried to do those things as you're doing them.
No, I'd done some kind of workshop stuff like woodwork and general building, a little bit of building labouring in the past. And I built a sauna just prior to build for that. That came before, didn't it? Yeah, I built a sauna, which also, I ended up having to take that project on more than I expected. And that gave me a wealth of experience to come to this with, I suppose. So, yeah, I didn't come in unskilled, but I've definitely learned a lot along the way anyhow. And then since it got to lock-up stage, all of this sort of extra cladding, you can probably see some in the background of up on the roof there. That's all me. And a lot of the other stuff, sort of the interior fit out, is I've done as well, which has taken a long time. A lot longer than I would have expected.
Saying how long was the build until you felt like you were able to move in?
We moved in 2019, so it was about a year.
But it wasn't finished.
Then we had to move out again so that I could do a bunch of work.
Yeah. Well, we moved in December 2019, and then of course the pandemic hit early 2020, and we were living. So the house is still at my parents' house, but we at that point we were still using my parents' bathroom because they have 2 bathrooms inside, so we were still using a bathroom in there. So when the pandemic hit, we wanted to make sure that we could isolate in here if we needed to. So we then finished the bathroom and did all of that stuff to make sure that we were fully self-contained in here. So that was probably, I guess, January, February, probably February 2020. And then we've pretty much been living in here ever since, but we moved out for a few months, not the summer just gone, but the summer before, so that Jesse could do a bit of work on it. I don't even remember what you did.
What I did either. Something.
We were still in like newborn baby land a bit.
Just you have to get everybody out because there's dust and preparation and all that kind of thing.
And you would know what it's like in a tiny house if you're doing any work. There's just no space for anyone to be.
It's so true. Yeah, I think a lot of people think they're going to move in and finish off, and that might work if there's one person and they don't mind living in a work site. But I think it's important to remember that if you're renovating a big house, you'd isolate the rooms and you'd shut the door. And you might move your kitchen into your laundry or something so that you can renovate your kitchen. You just move your essential appliances in there. But you're not also trying to live in that space that's being renovated, so there's no, given that there's very few internal walls, there's no way of shutting out the mess and the tools. Are you stepping over tools and there's no bench space, there's a drill on it, and let alone everything else.
And there's kids, of course, and safety.
Well, so it was towed down from Coburg in, I think it was April 2019 at the lock-up stage. So pretty much had almost nothing inside at that point.
Yeah, the bench wasn't it? We pretty much done our budget by that stage too. So we went pretty much double over budget for this.
Yeah, I remember when it got towed down because I hadn't seen it for a few months. And I remember when it got towed down and I was so excited. And then it got here and I looked inside and it's like, oh my God, there's just so much to do. So that was a bit full on. And there was, and then we were living inside at mum and dad's at that point because we'd moved in there because we were struggling to pay rent and finish the tiny house because all our money was going to rent. All our work money was going to rent. So we weren't able to put any more money into the tiny house, and it just was stalling. So we thought if we move in with mum and dad, then we can kind of put more money into the tiny house and get it ready to move into. So that was all we did. And then it was like April till December. Jesse was just, every spare moment out here doing stuff. We had some of the guys, or was it just?
Yeah, I had some of the guys who worked on it up in Coburg come down a couple of times. But there was no, like, I've put this walling with the sliding door back here. That wasn't there. The bathroom wasn't there. The stairs weren't here. Kitchen bench.
Remember the stairs were, that was the other thing.
Oh, okay. Stairs were, okay, yeah. And then that nook over there. So
It was a shell. It was very much a shell.
very much a shell. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, yeah, right. So you've received it, and it's a long way in, and lots of money's already gone in, and it's arrived, but it's still not livable, and there's still a big uphill trajectory to go in terms of workload before you can move in.
And just like no money really left to throw at, like not like not a pool of money to throw at it, like just like work every week to put more money into it.
Right. Yeah.
Situation.
Yeah, you have to earn it to feed the project. Can I ask you about your budgetary breakdown? Like, what did you expect to pay? What do you think you paid?
Expected 60.
Okay.
Like, that was pretty ambitious.
But I remember we spoke to Will and he was like, yeah, we can go with that one.
That's just the way it goes.
All optimistic.
Yeah. I mean, now that I've started building, I don't think there's been a single job that hasn't gone over budget. It just seems to be an inevitable theme. But we banked on about, 60, 65 or something like this. And I think roughly it would have been about 120 in the end.
All things considered, paying people as
Yeah.
And if you add Jesse's labor on top of that.
You wouldn't.
Yeah, but if we were.
If you were.
You just pass out.
You just think, it's really hard to get paid for all the money that you put, like all the time that you put into it. It's not an equation that most people would pay for. Yeah.
And that was really hard for me because I'm sort of an artist as well, and like I've got out projects I want to work on, and I'm sort of trying to write a book, and I'm just out working on the tiny house.
And the other thing was that at that point I had gone back to work, and Jesse was the stay-at-home parent with OB, and I think that that's also something that I think Jesse, like, it's been hard being in this house because I think Jesse feels like he missed out on a lot of that parenting, because he was putting so much effort into the tiny house and not getting to spend that time with OB.
Yeah, that's tricky, isn't it? So you were trying to build as well as be a stay-at-home dad. And how old was Obi in that period?
2, 3.
Yeah.
Sure.
And was there another baby around at that point, or was that before your second baby?
No.
So second baby, Forrest, he came August 2020 in the middle of the lockdown. So
I resigned from work. We moved into the tiny house and found out that we were pregnant. Yeah, having another baby. And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
it was cool though. He was born in this house. I put some extra support under the floor, and we put a birthing pool in where we're sitting now, and so that was really nice. It's kind of nice to not have to go to hospital amidst all that. Yeah, well, like apparently they were moving people in and out of hospital birthing at that point in time, like very quickly.
So you didn't have any recovery time at hospital. You just had to.
Yeah, it's like a lot of pressure.
And, you know, like being here at mum and dad's, like, whilst it's been difficult to be, like, it's a 1/4 acre block and we're in their front driveway, like, so we don't have much privacy or space to ourselves, and they didn't have a whole lot of privacy from us. And, but, you know, in the context of giving birth in the middle of a lockdown, you know, like they were, my auntie was here with them, who's the home birth midwife as well. My brother was here at the time, and they were all bringing out buckets of water to fill the pool because it all happened quicker than they anticipated. And, you know, and then as soon as he was born, you know, like they all were able to come out and see him, and, you know, like, and then we had that care around us at that, you know, really important time, and Obi had people around to look after him and stuff. So, you know, like there were, and you know, being in lockdown for 2 years, and there being for that whole time we were living in the tiny house, there being a fair bit of the time where no one could go anywhere, we had community.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really important. You were taken care of when probably other people in your situation who were in a more conventional housing circumstance would be probably a lot more isolated.
Yeah. So I think we were like, in some ways it was like the hardest time to try and move into a tiny house, but in other ways it was like we felt like we were really kind of blessed to have chosen this way of doing things and to be in the situation we were in when the most unexpected things happened, you know. So
That's a pretty great story too, being able to do a home birth and a water birth, a tiny house. I reckon, I mean, you're the only couple that I know who've pulled that off. Good job.
Thanks. It was great. It was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was ideal, really. And I think there was talk of they were turning women around 6 hours in the hospital. Like it had to be in and out 6 hours, and the partner wasn't allowed to go in because of COVID. And so it was pretty ideal for us to have that situation.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Something about tiny living made a lot more sense. I couldn't say exactly why, but tiny living seemed to make a lot more sense when the lockdowns hit and it was sort of a hard time. You'd think it'd be the opposite almost, like you'd think, oh, we're crammed in here and whatever, but it wasn't. It was really like, and when that happened, it was really good to have the space and the community around us. And
It is. It's counterintuitive. I'm sure a lot of people were thinking, oh no, anybody in a tiny house during lockdowns will be going mental. But I guess because you're parked on your parents' block, you've got the garden and you've got like a familial connection that you're allowed to be in because you're still part of the household in a way.
Yeah.
And then I guess if anybody felt like they had symptoms, you could all completely isolate to protect each other.
Yeah. I did at one point. Yeah.
You'd actually get COVID, did you say?
no, I didn't get it. I just went and isolated because I had a contact. I went out, tent out in the backyard, took myself out there.
Good on
But
you.
anyway,
Well, and you guys are the first people that I've interviewed who have lived in a tiny house with your family. Like, you know, everybody else has been adults living in their tiny house. So you guys are clocking 4 people, and 2 of them under what age were they when they were with this?
So where we moved in, Obi was 3. And actually, like that was really nice when it was just the 3 of us. When Obi was that age, he loved like the loft behind us was his loft, and he just like he loved it. It was his little space, and whenever people came to visit, he was like, "Come up to my loft," and you'd take everyone up there, and just like he was so excited by the space. And we had the loft above, so we each had a loft. And it was really nice for that size family, I think, like 1 kid. When Forrest came along, initially when he was a newborn, I think it worked. He was a good sleeper, so I think that helped as a baby. Because obviously, like the noise of a baby crying will wake everyone else up.
We've sort of had maybe a little bit of a bad combination of like one who doesn't want to go to sleep, which is Obi, and one who's a really light sleeper, which is Forrest. So Obi would just yell out all of a sudden, as 3, 4, 5-year-old kids do, and Forrest would wake up. So one of the really big challenges has been sound and privates, like sound privacy full stop, but sound privacy particularly.
Yeah.
That's been, we've at one point we thought we were going to need to put an extra like insulated wall up here just to block the sound so that we could have Forrest in there and be asleep and not wake him up.
Yeah, because even before Forrest came along, Obi used to get really like he's very sensitive to a lot of sensory stuff. So he was like would want it to be completely dark and silent when he was going off to bed at night, and so he would like make us turn off all the lights in the house, and like we couldn't make a sound, and so it just meant like you couldn't do anything until he was asleep because there was no door that you can shut or anything like. And that, every single evening got a bit challenging.
Yeah.
And then, I think, once Forrest came along, it was okay initially, but then once he was able to start moving, like, because he co-slept with me, and then we were in the loft above, which doesn't have any barrier, like it has a barrier but not a full barrier, and then it just got to the point where we were like, it's not safe to have him up. Yeah,
we really had to make big adjustments once Forrest came along, because Obi was already kind of at an age where he was smart enough to keep himself out of that kind of trouble, whereas Forrest needed proper, like we'll show you that there's a gate up that I've built up there. You can actually see that all that stuff back here happened after Forrest. And you stop him from being able to go off to the edge.
And so were you not able to install those kid-safe gates up in the top loft that you were co-sleeping in?
No, because of the ladder. The ladder made things really difficult.
Yeah, and the other, and because there's a gap at the other end as well.
Try and put any kind of gate up while you're climbing vertically, it's just it doesn't work.
Right. So that's just why, that was why we moved out. So that was why we moved out for that summer. And when he was just like 3 or 4, he was like 4 months old, and we moved out for a few months, and we swapped the lofts. So we moved Obi to this loft, and we moved the king size. So they'd both be at a king size bed. We moved the king size mattress over to that loft, and Jesse put the gate and the barrier on so that I could sleep over there with Forrest, and we could put him there for naps and stuff, because I couldn't put him down for a nap and leave the house. Like, not that you normally leave the house but like I couldn't, walk outside.
Put the washing on the line or something.
Yeah, or anything, because I had to be in here, because if he'd woken up, he would have crawled straight off the edge.
Yes. Yeah.
And fallen badly. So it was just like it got to the point where I think just before we moved out for the summer, where it was really, really stressful to be in here. And also I think one of the real challenges of having kids in a tiny house is that someone once said to us about traveling in a caravan with their kids that if one person's experiencing something, like experiencing a bad mood or having a bad day or just like whatever they're experiencing, everyone in the house feels it. And 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, like they have big feelings, and so Obi has had a lot of big feelings in the time that we've been living in this house, and it's every time, and we all have, but I think it's just really challenging when you've got a child that has really big meltdowns and really like big feelings, that there's just no space to get away from it. There's no he can't take himself off to a room, or one of us can't take him off to a room and the other one have space, or like it's like if you're in having one of those parenting moments where you're like, I really need to just like go and take 10 deep breaths by myself so I'm not going to explode, then you have to lock yourself in the bathroom. Like that's the only place you can go. So, yeah,
There's no lock on the part.
no, there's no dock. You can close the door and hope that nobody tries to open it.
Yeah, there's so much to be said for being able to decompress, isn't there? Just have some space around you that's supported by internal walls and doors.
Yeah.
And
And I think like if we had a bigger space outside, that might have been a bit easier. But because mum and dad were right there, it's like also hard to feel like you can go out and just like, walk around the garden without someone being like, is everything okay?
yeah, you just need the privacy to
Just want to be
decompress.
alone. Yeah.
Oh yes, I can totally.
Having said all that, it's probably worth noting that the same problem is also it has its upsides. We had times where there's just having the space and the two kids within earshot all the time. Just the sense of closeness is really nice, been nice at times as well. Like just the coziness of it is actually also a good thing at times as well as challenging.
Totally. I think it would be nicer for the kids than for the adults too, because they know that you're always there.
Yeah.
And for the adults, they're like, yeah, I'm always here.
I think, one of the nicest things that I felt about the tiny house was I can remember like just sitting on the couch downstairs in the evening and being like, I can hear both my kids breathing and it's so lovely, like it's just so nice to be able to hear them both and know that they're both safe and not have to go check on them or, and know that they can in their sleep hear me or whatever. Yeah. Which, like has its upsides and downsides.
Yeah. It meets that safety need and that intimacy need. Yeah, and it also, as you say, like sort of creates other problems, but it's good to just be realistic about what's involved. Like it's a different set of complexities than living in a conventionally sized house. So really good to just talk about the pros and the cons.
Yeah. And I think like now, like look, like because we've just moved into a conventionally sized house, well, quite a large house. Just seeing like a Forrest, particularly, like he's almost 2, he just loves running around, like he'll just run circles of the house. And, and then one of them, they'll take themselves off and go and play for a while. And, you can kind of leave their toys out and you're not going to break an ankle tripping over something. Whereas in the tiny house, so like, as soon as they've got toys out, the house is a complete mess. And there's nowhere to go where there's not mess. And, yes, that has its ups and downs as well. But, yeah.
Because you can clean it very quickly, but it gets messy very quickly.
Yeah, you find that you're cleaning the same space over and over and over again. So that you change function. I found that really hard with like having to change nappies in a like just maybe 2 square meters spare space and then having to get dressed there and play toys there. And then also that transformed into our eating space when we fall down this table behind. And, I just found like, wow, it's not that with a tiny house, you don't have much stuff and therefore you don't clean. That might be true if you're just adults living in the space because you put away your own things. But when it needs to transform the use of it every 10 minutes or 30 minutes or something, I just found that I was just constantly cleaning the same space, which was really challenging to my mental health. It was like there wasn't a station for toys and a station for changing nappies and a station for eating. We just didn't have that luxury.
Yeah, and I remember when Forrest was coming along, we were like, which came up with all these different ideas for like a nappy change station. Just like in the end, I think we ended up moved in a change table, and we just had like a change table in here, which was like ridiculously space consuming. But we were just like, there's just nowhere else to have all of this, have all these nappies, like 'cause we did cloth nappies and stuff, and and the other thing, like I think now that we have a full size house and we have a laundry, I'm like, how did I get out of laundry for so long doing cloth nappies? Because one of the sacrifices we made. We have a full size shower, like a big shower, but our washing machine was outside. So I've been, basically rinsing cloth nappies in a bucket in the bathroom and then washing them outside in the washing machine.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You need a medal, and I think you get like homesteading mum medal of the year from me. From me. That's messy. We did cloth nappies with a conventional laundry, and it was hard enough. And
Well, yeah, now that I'm doing it with a conventional laundry, I'm how did I live without this for 18 months? Yeah, it's just like, it's also just amazing what you adapt to. Like, having said that, I'm like, I could probably go back to that. Like, it's harder for sure, but yeah, it beats the the mental load of knowing that every plastic nappy I throw into landfill is going to be there for the next 200, 500 years. So.
totally. I think that I was so grateful that the war on waste did not do one on disposable nappies, because my guilt levels would be so through the roof, because I didn't do cloth nappies for a super long time. I think I did them for about a year with the first child, and then when the second child came along, I was just like, disposables. It was just a reality check of what I could pull off. Yeah, it's
Do what we can do.
yeah. So good on you for doing a lot. Okay, so there's a lot, isn't there? There's nappies and privacy and auditory privacy and feelings, and there's so much complexity. Just in that
Trying to get dressed.
Trying to get dressed with the table down.
Yeah. Yeah, because we've got the table that pulls out, like that folds down, like you guys, and pulls out. And just one of the things Jesse did when we moved out for the summer was put in extra storage under the couch, under the thing, because we just didn't have enough storage with 2 kids, because, they just come with lots of stuff, like clothes and toys and all of that. So, so then all our clothes were back there. So it's like if someone's eating breakfast and someone's trying to get dressed.
We have to climb under the table to get to those drawers.
wow.
I think that stressed Jesse out like the most, more than anything else.
Yeah, that part. Yeah, when you've blocked off the width dimension with the tables, that you're having to find really uncomfortable ways of getting. Were you literally crawling from the shower under the table to get to your clothes?
Well, I mean, if it was because we got the storage behind the table, anytime I'm drawing or doing craft things or eating or whatever the case, you wouldn't, like, you either have to sort of pull the table out and then get in, or you just scooch under the table and pull it out and awkwardly grab it. So
Don't upset someone's breakfast or craft activity.
Oh, it's just the effort, like you say. It's like moving something to, something I learned is that you'll cut every corner you possibly can with sort of living in a tiny house, in terms of doing the everyday things like pulling open a drawer or putting a thing away. Yeah, you don't want to have to lift anything, to move anything, to do anything kind of thing. You want the quickest, easiest access to like a drawer or like a cupboard or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think we moved all our clothes. They were initially like we have wardrobes behind us in the stairs, but the rest of our clothes were upstairs in our loft. And when we did that move, we moved all our clothes downstairs. It was such a pain to get out of the shower, and if you hadn't brought your clothes down with you, then to climb up to the loft, in a towel, grab your undies, and then come down in your undies and like to get the rest of your clothes. It's just like.
I think when you're sort of planning, sometimes you think, oh well, I'll just pull that open and move that aside to get to that, and that won't be a problem. But when it's every day, sort of over and over again, it starts to get really old really quick.
Yeah. By open shelves, it's really good where you can see the thing, like put your hand on it straight away, put it away, and you haven't had to do Tetris to figure out how to get it again.
You have to.
Yeah. And I think that what you're talking about there is having like a loft that you can't necessarily stand in. Probably very few people can stand in their loft space when they're working within vehicle heights. And then I think it's that design concept at the beginning, isn't it? Where it's like, okay, so this is how our house is. We put our clothes in our bedroom and we get dressed next to our bed, but it's totally more functional to get dressed where you can stand up and probably even in the bathroom. So like, I really like that idea of there's a wardrobe in a mini room that's on the way between the bathroom and the rest of the house. But then you sort of, you can still stay with the door closed and in your privacy, and you can stop all the steam from getting into if you've got a double door pocket. So you can just stand in there and get dressed and move on, and then you're done, and you're not going into a
Of course,
area.
sacrifice as well, isn't it? Like to do that, then you're adding like an extra meter or something to the house potentially.
Yeah, which is a
But then you
problem.
could have your nappy change station.
It might come under the heading of maybe things that you do differently or something, or maybe not. Like, I don't know. Is there a list of things that you would do differently, do you think, if you were to?
Oh yeah, number one thing I do differently, and this is what I say to people when they ask me about tiny houses. I'm thinking of building a tiny house. I just say get a tiny house company to build it for you.
Really?
Unless you love building, unless building's like something you're really super interested in, you've got lots of time and you don't have other things you want to be doing, like kids or creative projects or whatever. Unless you really, like, this is really something you want to go for, then get a tiny house company to build it pretty much 100%. Like if you can get the tiny house built and delivered 100% finished, that's the ideal thing. I think, because something I've come to realize is that builders don't know vehicles or caravans, and caravan builders don't know houses. It's like a tiny house company has that all of that stuff already figured out. And
Well, Jesse, I just want to say you would hope. And unfortunately, I know there are a lot of companies in the industry who are unfortunately not as responsible as people who are going to live in it and own it, and how well they consider their tiny house. So I feel like I want to theoretically get on board with that idea of hand it over to a professional who you trust, who can manage it all. Because if you're not I think what you're saying is, if you don't really want to spend potentially 2 years of your life doing only a tiny house, then don't do it. Hand it over to somebody that you trust. And I hope that that's caught there, because unfortunately, I think that there are some dodgy operators around who are sending out tiny houses that are overweight intentionally, which makes it unroadworthy. But not just that you can tow it on its own wheels and get a sticker on it, you can't even tow it on its own wheels. So I've heard of companies just so builders just being a little bit I'm trying to be diplomatic here, like they're selling something that's not fit for purpose under a tiny house company name. And so I feel like I think it's so up to the individual, like the consumer. I'm thinking from a consumer advocacy kind of perspective, to really know who's managing the weight and all the attachment methods and the finishes and the fixtures and everything, because it's so easy. If you go 1 kilogram over the weight limit of the trailer's ATM, it's not legal to tow it on its own wheels. So that means that you're up to being on the back of a lowrider. And if you've built it to full height and then you load it on the back of a lowrider, no company will touch it because it's an insurance problem for them. So, it's like, I want to say, yeah, sure, hand it over to any tiny house company, but unfortunately,
well, not any tiny house
company. Yeah.
No, I've said, like, there's a good tiny house company. As I've said that I haven't, I've sort of recommended, because people have been like, should I do it myself? And I'm like, well, you're going to come across things with plumbing and electrical and all these sort of things that you if you're going to learn it along the way, you might find yourself snookered. And I've found myself snookered on a couple of things. Sort of didn't think about it in the early stages, and then kind of realized a bit later that, there's regulations like double pole switches with electrical and just points of consideration that if, and again, a responsible tiny house company or an experienced one, and they've been through these issues, they've done the troubleshooting, and they've sort of at least figured it out, because a lot of it still is quite uncharted territory with these builds. It's definitely a pretty unique build. So having that experience and having come up against those, the trying to reconcile the vehicle with the house conundrum is invaluable. And I think that's something that that tiny house companies, because I think what I hear a lot of people say is, I've got a builder friend, I'll get them to do it because they're a builder. And I'm like, yeah, but they don't know how to build a caravan. And it's like, yeah, so, there's all sorts of things with caravans that, like the width and the height and the weight and the regulations with doors, and that a builder who hasn't built a tiny house before would probably think, it's okay, it's just a small house, but it's really not. It's more like building a boat, I say, than building a house.
Yeah, I agree.
It's more like that's the amount of consideration and equations you need. Or I don't know, how do you think you would gauge that for a person who's kind of shopping around, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, what's involved in an interview with a builder to assess their viability as a tiny house on wheels builder? Yeah, I think that would be a serious conversation about whether or not they've ever built anything on wheels, and are they familiar with the Vehicle Act, and who's taking responsibility for the weight all the way through. Because, and I would put that in a contract all the way through, that, there will be 3 points of checking the weight, and who's legally responsible for the weight at the end of the day, so that the product that the builder delivers is guaranteed to be underweight. And if it is overweight, the payments will not be forthcoming because it's no longer fit for purpose. So I would actually have that very clear from the beginning, who manages the weight and whose legal responsibility it is to meet the weight limits and to be under the weight limits, because I think it's a common houses on foundations building practice to just do everything that the owner specifies. So the builder might think, I don't like it, but you asked for it, so I'll do it. And that's a common way of organising a house build. They just say, as specified. And if you've specified all Tassie hardwood as an exterior or interior cladding or something, you're absolutely overweight. And even hardwood floors might put you overweight, or anything, because it's all cumulative. And so if the builder thinks that you're managing the wait list and you think that the builder's managing the wait list, you've automatically accidentally missed it. And so you just need to have somebody on the point. And then, so I often recommend somebody asks their builder to make a detailed density calculation in a theoretical way before they order their trailer, so that they're sure that their theoretical model works from a density/weight level, and then build the lightest weight shell that you can, weigh that, and have all this in the contract. So weigh the shell, and then taking a calculation of all of the weight limits or just measurements, like weighing your materials and your offcuts all the way through, so that at particular points you're measuring it off, and what that very, very small amount is coming back to, like how much weight do we have to play with now when we're finishing off. And then having contingency plans as well is a really good idea. So having removable joinery is a really important part of it, because joinery can just clock up your hundreds of kilos so quickly. But if you can remove that for the event of travel, then you still have a potentially viable project. And just to have that contingency is a really good idea.
Yeah. And we potentially, this came down at lockup at about 3.9. So this is 3.9 tons, and it's the trailer's rated for 4.5 tons. So I'm just hoping that we haven't done 600 kilos worth of but I don't, until I weigh it again, I won't know. So that's another good example of like how, that you can get snickered. I decided to do a proper shower with a cement screed and tiles. It's not that big, but I thought this would be that'll be the thing that puts it overweight if we go to move it. And we can remove the stairs and we can remove the bench with a bit of messing around, but it's not ideal to have to do that. So
There's many things. It's such a complex thing you've taken on, probably way more complicated than you thought it would be, because everyone's thinking, so small house, it's easy, it's bite-sized. Like, wait, no, it's really complicated, and you want to have a real eye for detail and a patience about it. It's tricky. Oh, wow. Okay, great. So just getting back to you moved out. When did you decide to call it quits with the house? Tell me about your I would call it like a breakup with the tiny house. Did you have a breakup moment with the tiny house, or is it sort of like just an evolving set of really sensible decisions and no one had a tantrum?
Or a series of
Yeah. Because I feel like I had a tantrum and I broke up with the tiny house. Like that was my story.
I think for me, there's been a lot of like watching Jesse just like, he just sits here and like looks at things, and I'll be talking to her and suddenly he's gone. He's gone into tiny land. He's gone into like thinking about materials, thinking about where's that going, what's moving, what's that doing, like what could I do to fix that problem? Like he's just like he disappears into this problem solving tiny house brain, and it just has never stopped, no matter what point he's got to. He just like, no matter how much he does, it's like he is just, it's too distracting for him to live in this house, because it's like the way I think about it, because the only thing I really have to compare it to is when I went to uni and I was writing essays, and I remember being in the middle of writing an essay and feeling like, this is complete crap, because when I read it, all I can read is my mistakes and my thought processes that went into it. I can't actually see it for, the sum of its parts. Like I can only see the parts. And I feel like that's the tiny house for Jesse. He can't look at this as like, this is a beautiful tiny house and a real accomplishment. It's like he sees all the parts and he sees all the mistakes and all the problems that happened. And I don't know if he'll ever, like if we lived in it longer term, if he'd ever get past that. And so I think that it's been like we've been kind of putting
No, we've never finished it. So just now. So it's hard to say. Well, one of their good example is like you'll see that there's sort of a lot of lining on the walls, like these sort of strips. So there's sort of something I've had to do to remedy. When we built it like SIP style, which is like we built our own SIPs panels. SIPs panels are usually foam and this oriented strand board, which is quite thick, and people build houses out of them. To save weight, we got just the foam and took away the 18 millimeters of oriented strand board, OSB, and we put 7mm ply either side. And they're like, that's what our walls are, and that's what the inside of the wall is. It's just ply, and behind that's foam. And I think perhaps the fact that you didn't have that rigid structure with the OSB, the foam has cured in a concave fashion. The walls have just started sucking in.
Oh.
So then I've taken long screws and put them and then so when they started sucking in, the contact adhesive that we glue them on popped off, and suddenly we had these floppy ply walls. And so then to remedy that, I've taken screws, gone all the way through to the other side of the wall, and that's held them in. And then the boards are going across those screws to stop any what's that for? Well, to stop the screws, because the walls are still kind of moving in, the screws then pop out. So that's the kind of the screws combined with the boards are sort of holding it in place.
Wow.
Been quite a big thing to remedy. And that took a lot of thinking just to come up with a solution for it, because it's sort of like, well, what do? you take all the, nobody expected the foam to cure that way. I don't think, like, the company we got it off, we've been like, well, yeah, you could buy the foam off us if you want. But then it started to sort of cure in this sort of moving inwards like that. So a lot of things like that have really weighed on me a lot, and taken a heck of a lot of mental, and then there's just other sort of, things that about it that are, it has been a pretty experimental build, and things that are less than perfect that would have been done, we could have done better from the get-go, and that sort of is hard to, just be okay with, and just sort of, say, okay. That's sort of one of the reasons I've been pretty keen to get out, because, it is a little bit like, yeah. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of great things about it too, but like Esther said, it's hard for me to see clearly because I've been so involved with it, and I haven't had an easy time switching off that, like, even just as we've been doing the interview, I'm looking at one of the boards and thinking, oh yeah, that one got a bit moldy. I left that one out in the weather a little bit too long and lost. I sanded it up and painted it. It's still, it's just the way it kind of is. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really big deal, isn't it, to live in your experimental project, like live in your learning process. So you're living in your apprenticeship. It might be different even just for you, like just to resolve that particular thing, just in a different tiny house. Like even if you do it a second time, you're not learning, you're going from a level of experience. So even if you did it, that sounds like you don't want to do it again in a way. And I did not. So I guess someone is.
I'm stuck for punishment.
Yeah. But like to get it so that you're not living in your learning experience, and constantly surrounded by reminders of what, like, you look at the wall and you imagine see all the stages that's gone into that wall, whereas everyone else will look in and see, oh, this is beautiful. Like they'll just see the surface. They won't see the story. That's a significant emotional hurdle potentially to get through, particularly when you're a problem-solving brain, and Fred's like that too.
Yeah.
He will.
pretty hard to switch it off sometimes.
Yeah.
Or to like meditate or something.
A lot.
Constant.
I think the thing that kind of led to our breakup with the house is also just that we found ourselves snookered in terms of, like, I think when we got into doing this, we were like, it's going to provide us with freedom to move and, to live a more flexible kind of lifestyle. But what we found is that, I think partly because it took longer than we anticipated and it cost a lot more than we anticipated, life has changed obviously in that period of time to look quite different. We've got another child now, COVID happened and all of that. And so we're in quite a different situation financially. I now don't work, and we're homeschooling our eldest, so I'm home full time with the boys, and Jesse's working, and we don't have the kind of the capacity to be able to buy a block of land to move the tiny house onto, and our ideas about potentially renting, a block of land somewhere, I guess living here on mum and dad's property, we kind of realized how much more complicated that was than we maybe anticipated at the beginning. And so, we found ourselves kind of in this situation where we've got this house and we're no longer in debt, but we don't have anywhere to go with it. Like, we're kind of stuck here because we don't have any money to move from here. So then we're like, well, if we sell the house, then we'll have money and then we can, move on. So it's like, yeah, because a lot of people say to us, oh, why are you selling, if you just moved it to a block of land and you can have more space? Because we kind of thought, like, it is a small space, but if we had our own, like if we had a block of land or more space, then we could have, a big deck and potentially eventually build another one, like we talked about, and have more space around us. But we just with day-to-day life being, so expensive, and it just felt like we're never going to get there. Like, even if we stayed here another couple of years living in this tiny house with our 4 people.
Which did provide us a good ability to save money.
It did.
Like, definitely, we've done, like a lot better being here and paying very little rent. So it has given us a lot of opportunities. It's just also,
But in terms of our mental well-being, we couldn't do it.
and it's also quite a thing to relocate a family to someone's property. Like if we didn't have enough money to get fully off grid. And like Esther said, it's just being here with the kids. It's such a big thing for the grandparents, Esther's folks. It's like it's not a small thing at all. We're really like living with each other, and it might be, if you're sort of a couple or a single person with a tiny house, it might be kind of easy to just prop up in the back corner of someone's property and be relatively inconspicuous. But for us, it's like we've got the kids, and that's sort of it's all about what the people are like that we'd be moving with and how they'd be able to handle having the kids around. And so it's not quite as, I think, and who knows, maybe we'll end up in a situation like that. It's at this point in time, I think that's what we're kind of trying to work out is,
we're open to, I guess, if something like that comes up for us. But I think we're also at the point where we're like, just for simplicity's sake and to kind of move on to the next stage of whatever our family's life is going to look like, that the simplest thing for us at the moment seems to be to sell it to get the money so that we can move on to something else. Because we, also like we've been at my parents' house now for like 3 years, and that's been a lot, like they've been very generous to us and very, like with their time, and also just like, letting us be here and all of that. But I don't think like ongoing, it's not sustainable. We're too close. Like maybe if they lived on an acre or a few acres and we had like our own little space, that might work better. But just the situation we're in, it's not sustainable for long term. And we also had to just acknowledge that we're not can't do it forever.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, like, to me, I still clock it is a success because you've had the chance to save money and you've created an asset, which I'm hoping you can turn into a bunch of money through the sale for potentially a healthy deposit on a overly priced yet conventional house, because that's the reality.
Yes.
there.
To talk about the positives though, now that I've started doing building work, definitely the tiny house model I think is the way to go. Like I'm just like, there isn't a house that I've worked on that isn't sinking into the ground or, so I think to be on wheels and off the ground and to have the back control over where you are and how the house sits, you can, it's not really, you don't need to re-stump, you just re-level. That's powerful. I think that's definitely a huge advantage to tiny house living over conventional house.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're comparing it to the foundations. Like what you're talking about is conventional housing foundations, and when they fail, it's traumatic. And so, where you get a trailer, you're buying the foundations of your home, and it is already 600 or 700 above ground. And I know that there are some people in the flood recovery kind of areas, in Australia, they're thinking tiny houses just because they do have that healthy lift off the ground and you can move them. So, with rising seawaters and the instability of foundations and potential floods, like weighing the two foundation options against one another, I can see what you're saying, the trailer can provide benefits that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of before. I'm curious about council. You say that you're living in the driveway of the tiny house is parked in the driveway of your parents' place. Has the council ever knocked on the door and said, you can't live in a caravan? No?
No.
We just did the don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. We
for forgiveness.
we let our neighbours all know what we were doing.
Yeah. And that was the most, we spoke to our neighbors and said, here's what we're thinking of doing, and here's how long we're thinking of doing it. What do you think? And they would, either side of us were both like, yep, no stress at all. And we just haven't told council anything. And I've told people, like, don't. So if you can, just don't. Because at the moment, there isn't a permit that you can get for even a caravan down. We're in the Mornington Peninsula Shire down here. There's no permit that you can get for a tiny house. It's not on the radar yet, really, at all. So
I haven't looked into it recently, but yeah, I think we were kind of lucky in that my parents have been here, since 1984. So, like we live in, it is still a relatively small community here. And I think a lot of people know my family. And so we're probably lucky in that probably people aren't tell on us, like they got us out to the council or whatever. Like, it might not be so lucky in other places, but I think that the community here has helped with that.
Yeah.
Part of a community.
Yeah. Yeah, great. You've been lucky. That's nice that you don't have that added stress of, oh, now we've got to move, But I think it is a factor to take into consideration as sort of like, what's it going to be like to live with that possibility that somebody might?
Well, it was always there as a possibility, but
Like we knew that moving in that if someone complained, we would potentially be kicked out.
Yeah.
So it's just
hoped it wouldn't happen.
Indeed. I hope that it hasn't, so that's good. Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit tricky, this proposal that you're talking about with having a block of land. Like if it's an empty block of land, a lot of councils will have a problem with you putting tiny houses on it, multiple or one. They see it differently if there's a house on there because they know that their rates are taken care of and that there's a drainage system for grey water and that there's rubbish being collected and all that sort of stuff. And that's their purview. So like considering the amenity and the grey water responsibilities that they have for their shire, they often have more of a problem with people living in a caravan on private property that doesn't already have an established house. So that's something to think about with your future planning. Just having that sense of, how exposed are you on a block of land if there isn't already an existing house that's ticked a lot of boxes for the council. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so that's something to. It's a spanner in the works. It's another complication, and I really hope that at some point the state government changes the laws so that everyone can just self-fund their own housing. Because there's, not everyone, but if people who are wanting to live in a tiny house and they're willing to fund it themselves, it just seems like such a financially good option, for the government to just say like, well, then you are allowed to pay for your own housing and put yourself up because that means that they don't have to pay for social housing, how much less money would that cost them, right? So it just seems like such an obvious change to make. But the way things are right now is that would be something I would ask you to resolve before taking that pathway, just for your own well-being. Complication number 1,408.
Yeah.
No, like.
Yeah.
pioneers.
Indeed. Yeah, a lot of people are ahead of their time, I think. Like,
it feels like the way of the future to live like this. Like it feels like the right way to be living. It's just in terms of like our impact on the environment and the use of space. Because really we should be living more of our lives outside. And I think it really it feels to me like the way of the future. We just have to get better at it. And part of that would be support from the government, obviously, to do things this way, to explore this way of living and help to make it better. Because I think there are people like you guys and like us who are on a smaller level, trying to do things differently, trying to live in a way that is more aligned to ideas around sustainability, to ideas around minimal living to ideas around community and all of that sort of stuff. We're really trying, but because we're going so far against the status quo, it's just so hard. I think that is the thing that you kind of don't anticipate when you're getting into tiny living, because it looks beautiful and it looks exciting and it's different, but different is so hard. Like, even though it feels to me like in my heart, it feels like the right way to be living, it's just so hard because of the way that our society is set up and the expectations that we have on people and the legal staff and the council here and just all the logistical stuff around it just make it so hard.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It certainly does. Yeah, it's like a psychic battle that you're having to hold within your energy of like, okay, justifying this again, or presented with the threat of being asked to move or being asked to talk about why again. And then on top of all the things, it's a bit crusade-y, or like adding an element of I don't know, the hero's journey in a way, like having to just sort of keep going on and on. I think it'll be way easier in 10 years' time, like when you're through this sort of massive transition period of like having these little kids, because that just goes for a long time. And I think it is really like a very challenging proposal to live in a tiny house with 2 little kids. I think that's just a hard time of life anyway. And to do it in like close quarters and with ideals in mind, and swimming uphill or against the stream a little bit with what's culturally expected of everybody, that's just tricky. So I think that tiny houses are awesome and that they can provide a great stepping stone, and they can totally fill gaps of housing for different periods of time in our lives, but doesn't mean that they're going to be appropriate for every stage of life. And and nor should they be asked to be. Just like a mansion isn't appropriate for every stage of life. It's like, no, that's not either. Like, it's nice to have options for when you're single or a couple, or when you've got babies, or when you've got teenagers. It's a different realm, or when you're living and taking care of an aging parent, or when the kids have moved out. These are all like it would be great if there were options for housing all the way along.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't reckon it's a failure, but I reckon that it's so useful that you're reflecting on the complexity, because I think that it'll really help people who are listening to the conversation, or who are watching the video, to get their heads around where they're at, given all these factors that you're raising. Because if people can listen through and go, I think I can resolve that bit with this, and I think that'll be okay for me, then they might still be able to go, it's a yes. And if it means that it's a no right from the get-go, then how much money and time have we saved people by sharing this information? And that's such a success as well,
Yeah, you have a deposit on a house instead.
Exactly. Thanks so much. This has been a really rich and interesting conversation for me. I feel like you've shared really generously. So thank you so much for being really transparent and like talking about the obstacles you faced and how you resolved them and how you did them again, and all that mental load of what you've faced and gotten through is extraordinary. And I just want to give you like hugs and thumbs up. And
No, thank you. Yeah, it's been really nice to talk about it actually. And I think like we've also we haven't had much contact with you guys at all, but I think Fred was just so supportive at the outset of our journey, and like coming up to Castlemaine and meeting you guys. I think we met you briefly, I met you briefly. I think you were heavily pregnant with your little.
okay.
Well, yeah, and I think but I remember just feeling supported by Fred and by you guys, on the outset of this journey, and just like knowing that you guys are out there. I think the big thing about if you are going to build a tiny house is connecting with other people who are doing it, because no one else really gets it. Like, as much as it takes so much explanation, but if you can talk to someone else who's built and lived tiny, then it's like they just get it. And I think that's really important.
So it's now late 2025, and I recently heard from Jesse and Esther. Like, I had to contact them to say, please may I publish that episode, even though we recorded it so many years ago. And they said, yeah, sure, happy to share it. Like, it's all true. It's just of the time. And Jesse also has asked us to please build him another tiny house trailer. So we are in the process of fabricating another tiny house trailer for him. He's thinking of a modular design where there's 2 tiny houses, and they're now living in northern New South Wales, where the climate is a lot more amiable to living inside-outside lives. So he's got some beautiful temple-like designs of tiny houses on wheels that he's lovingly, completely DIY building himself. He's reflected on how he is really happy to build the tiny house himself because it's under his control. It's his project. And of course, he's learned so much over the years, and he's able to just really take ownership of that. And he's treating it like an artistic expression, which is beautiful. So we're looking forward to seeing him when he comes to collect his next tiny house trailer for his next DIY build. If you're interested in building or buying a tiny house on wheels, I highly recommend taking our online course, which is called How to Build a Tiny House, the Australian online course, and you can find it at tinyhouseuniversity.com.au. Hundreds of people have used it to build a successful tiny house on wheels, and you can too. We also offer weekend workshops throughout the year where you get to sit for a whole weekend in a classroom environment and thrash out the problems of tiny house building. You'll be taught all of the basics, plus a whole bunch of new material about vapor permeable membranes and everything that we've learnt from passive house experiences for tiny house living to get the best thermal performance and humidity management in your tiny house. And you'll also get the benefit of hearing other people ask their questions and all of the discussion that really helps people thrash out their thoughts about their tiny house building project. With the weekend workshop, you also get the online course for free. So that's a really awesome set of ongoing notes that you can use throughout the period of time that you're building your house. So pop over to fredstinyhouses.com.au/education to find out more about those education offerings. You can follow Fred's Tiny Houses on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Pinterest. You can also reach out to us and just write to info@fredstinyhouses.com.au, and that email comes to me and I'll write back. If you're ready to buy a Fred's Tiny House trailer, then pop over to our website, fredstinyhouses.com.au/shop, and peruse through our wide range of tiny house trailers. We only build tiny house trailers. We don't build any type of other trailer. We specifically design all of our trailers with your house in mind. So everything that you need to think about for a tiny house build is considered inside a tiny house trailer design from Fred's Tiny Houses. So check that out at fredstinyhouses.com.au/shop. Please share these episodes with people that you know and love who are interested in tiny house builds. The more people who know about it, the better. Give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube and on Google and on Facebook and all the places. We love 5-star reviews. You'll see heaps of people have already done it, and we're really welcoming more because we want more and more people to build successful tiny house builds across Australia. Thanks heaps. Join us next week to hear from Aaron and Amanda, who built their tiny house in New South Wales, and I interviewed them in February of 2023. So we have updates from them as well in their 2025 version of their tiny house living adventure. Stick around and stay candid. If you've been listening to the podcast and you'd also like to see the tiny houses that we're talking about, you can actually watch the interviews on YouTube, where we get to see all of the pictures of their tiny house, the outcome, as well as the build. and it really helps to illustrate the conversation that we're having. So feel free to pop over to YouTube, and you can subscribe by looking up Brett's Tiny Houses and checking out the playlist of Candid Tiny House.